What's up, everybody? Welcome to the December 8th, 2025 IndiView Weekly Market Update. I'm Jeremy Bryan, and this is powered by Indy Wealth. We're going to get right into the hot button issues of the week. So without any further ado, let's get started. The interesting one to me this week is what's happening with Netflix, Paramount, and Warner Brothers. Now, acquisitions happen all the time. Potential acquisitions, somebody can jump ahead of somebody in line, like it appears that Netflix potentially did to Paramount here. It happens all the time. What is interesting to me about this is how much the government is involved in this. And I'm not sure this is the greatest precedent we're setting here. So by all accounts, Paramount was discussing acquiring Warner Brothers, which is absolutely fine. And Netflix came in and said, hey, we want to do that. We would rather buy this. And they came with a deal. They put one together, and Warner Brothers decided to go exclusively with Netflix for now. We'll see what happens. Paramount actually just came out today with another, I believe, hostile takeover bid. But the interesting part about this for me is both entities there are some antitrust concerns here. Obviously, Warner Brothers is one of the largest studios. As you consolidate more and more of these, you get less and less competition out there. So I understand from a regulatory point of view about doing that. But there was information that came out this week that CEO of Netflix had discussions with President Trump with regard to this potential merger deal. Basically, somewhat asking for a sign-off, if you will, or at least discussing the possibility of this. And that's the biggest concern I have here is we need to allow these things to not have pure government influence in order to happen and be a capitalist society like we said we are wanting to be. We should not be looking for quote unquote approval from one entity, one person, one thing as the blessing for doing these deals. I don't believe that's healthy. I don't believe that we should be looking to do that. Now, again, if you want to do your research and due diligence and saying this is a potential antitrust and getting ahead of that, if that's all it was, great. But sign off and approval from one entity and one person at the top of the chain there is not what I would call a healthy environment. It's not something I think that is terribly healthy for a longer period of time overall in business. So from my perspective, that's the more interesting part about this. Whether Warner Brothers is acquired by Paramount, whether Warner Brothers is acquired by Netflix, we'll let that happen. But we'll see where that goes. But from my side, I just think we need to be a little bit more careful here about what we're doing from acquiring approval on these things and acquiring a blessing and sign off from one particular individual. So I just wanted to highlight that as something that, I read this weekend that frankly made me a little cautious about the way we're directing these things going forward. Turning to more economic news, the jobs data had a mixed picture this week. There's a couple of things going on here. Is the recent information that came out this week from Challenger and ADP suggested that the job market is getting worse. So that is probably the more current news, if you will, but we're starting to get some government data again here. And the interesting part for me is that over the last 4 weeks, we've seen initial jobless claims actually start to decline. So I look at the 4-week average to try to eliminate some of the noise that you see from point-to-point analysis. The 4-week trend is actually coming down there a little bit. So it's interesting from my side in saying that, the current jobs data reports from the private entities that we're seeing are suggesting more weakness, while initial claims would suggest that things might be getting a little bit better out there and that we may be cresting around that. So I would call this a little bit more of a cloudy picture than probably what I've been talking about since the fall, which things are getting worse. That's what I've largely been saying since the beginning of, honestly, late summer, is that the jobs market is really starting to show some signs of deterioration and cracking. Now, some of that is immigration related, some of that is demand related, some of that's AI related. But what we're seeing is the potential of, or at least what I'll be paying attention to, is the potential of maybe that cresting for the short period of time and maybe reverting the other way and holding off on some of the real weakness in the jobs data report. Because as I said last week, consumer spending actually is still relatively decent. There's still enough out there. Consumer sentiment is terrible, but consumer action, the things that they're spending on, Black Friday results and those kinds of things, there does seem to be some continual aspect of growth there. And usually that doesn't portend to, if everybody is really concerned or everybody's getting laid off, or everybody's getting fired, I don't think we're going to see that level of growth in spend. Again, could this be that K-shaped component of that, is that all that spend is being directed by the median to upper income and the median to lower income is retrenching? Absolutely possible. I'm just saying right now there is not a pure evidence of either full contraction or full growth at this point. It's a little bit more muddy, and so we'll have to see more data points to see where this is actually going and how this portends to what the Fed is going to do, which is now 87% that they're going to cut in this next meeting, which seems to be a pretty foregone conclusion. At least the market feels that way. So what they do going forward after that, again, it's based upon jobs and inflation. And if jobs are truly weakening, then they may have further cuts to go. But if we start to see job stabilization and inflation staying higher, that could change that trajectory relatively fast. So it is something we have to pay attention to. I don't have enough clarity in this right now to give you a full-on stance on it, but the numbers are muddier than they've been over the past few months. And so I'll be looking for future numbers to kind of give better sense of direction. Turning to number 3, the earnings side, these are kind of what we call off-calendar earnings, if you will, is that, we're in December, and usually we wouldn't see a broad swath of earnings until mid-January at this point right now. But there's some interesting companies reporting. We're going to see Adobe, we're going to see Oracle, we're going to see Broadcom, and we're going to see Costco. These are all interesting. A lot of this is AI-oriented interesting. Oracle's been a really interesting stock in the effect of it has been considered an AI, beneficiary, if you will. The stock had done really, 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 really well for quite some time. And then you started to see, especially with Oracle was kind of the center of this, is people starting to get worried about AI deployments and the debt that comes as a result of it. And so you saw the debt pricing for Oracle actually started to rise. The CDS spreads, I'm not going to get terribly in the weeds on what that is, but the debt risk of Oracle was considered to be getting higher. And it really relayed through to some of the weakness we started to see in the AI-centered stocks. There was a lot of information on Oracle, especially during that period of time. It'll be interesting to see how they address that, if they address it at all. Oracle's always been super bullish on their own outcomes and their own outlook. So a lot of times you got to kind of read through that a little bit, but I will be looking at their call to just see what their report looks like. For one, what does the raw data look like, but also just how they're commenting around the deployment phase. I assume they're still going to say that they're in massive acceleration mode. Nothing has changed the course. We're winning deals left and right. All that fun stuff that would suggest that they're still bullish about their opportunity set. But I will be interested to see if they hedge on that at all in any way. Turning to the other ones, again, especially Broadcom. Broadcom's going to get a sense of AI deployment. Costco will give us a sense of not only their own business, but again, some of that K-shaped economy discussions. And Adobe is an interesting model in the effect of there is a thought process that Adobe is getting somewhat disrupted by AI rather than a beneficiary of it. We'll see how they counteract that and contradict that in their earnings call. So for an off-calendar earnings week, this is actually a relatively busy week that we're going to get some information from. Turning to the personal side, number 4, this is Old Man Yells at Cloud. Backing into parking spots. So I'll be honest, I don't do that. I am a pull-through guy. So if you're in a parking lot and you can pull through and so that you're facing forward, I will do that. But I don't back into spots. And to be honest with you, it drives me nuts when people do. I get it. I get the thought of being able to pull out. I've heard theoretically that everyone should do it so that it's more efficient and you can see when you're getting out. Totally get it. The problem is not all of us have agreed to this. And so when you start to see somebody holding there and really backing in and stopping all the traffic, it can be a little bit frustrating. I had this experience today, which is why I wanted to talk about it. I am not a back-in person. I understand the arguments, but it still kind of drives me a little crazy when people hold up the thing to do their backing in, and especially if they can't do it very well and they have to redo it and redo it and redo it. So again, I'm an advocate of the pull-through. I am not an advocate of the backing in. I'd be interested to hear the thoughts and rationale from those that consistently back in, how they feel about the other people staring at them while they do that. So that's all I have for this week. Tune in next week where we'll have the next hot button market topics. Till then, thank you very much. Take care.